My daughter-in-law held my wedding album over the metal trash can in the backyard, flicked a long lighter twice, and watched 53 years of my marriage catch fire. She didn't know I was standing at the kitchen window. She didn't know I had been watching for 4 minutes, and she certainly didn't know what was sitting inside the fireproof bedroom in my bedroom safe in my bedroom closet. The one my husband Raymond had bolted to the floor 3 weeks before he died, the one he'd made me promise never to open until the right moment came. I watched the flames curl the edges of the photographs. I watched my wedding dress, white and a perks of her I'd carried through 6 houses and 4 decades, turn to black and smoke. I watched my daughter-in-law brush her hands together when it was done, the way you do when you've finished a task that needed doing, and then I did something she never expected. I smiled, not because I was happy. I smiled Cass's. Not because I didn't feel the loss like a hand pressed against my chest, but because in that exact moment, standing at my kitchen window, watching the woman who had spent 3 years trying to erase me from my own son's life, I understood that she had just made the last and largest mistake she would ever make in mine. Welcome to Alpha Mom Stories, where the things they burn are never the things that last. Stay with me until the end. Subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment, because I have a feeling this one is going to find the people who need it most. My name is Eleanor Voss. I am 71 years old. For 44 years, I was a legal secretary, and before you think that means I sat quietly and took notes, let me tell you what a legal secretary actually does. She reads people. She remembers everything. She understands that what is said in a room is almost never the same as what is meant, and she knows. The way a woman who has spent 44 years watching lawyers and understands that the most powerful thing you can hold one doesn't know you have. That is something the other party doesn't know you have. Raymond used to say I should have been the attorney. He wasn't wrong. Raymond Voss was my husband for 53 years. 53 years of the kind of marriage that isn't perfect, because no marriage is perfect. It is good in the way a well-built house is good, solid in its bones, warm in its rooms, capable of standing through weather that would flatten something cheaper. Raymond was a civil engineer. He built bridges for a living, and I always thought that suited him, because he was the kind of man who spent his whole life thinking about what holds things together. He died on an ordinary Thursday in October, 18 months ago. The kind of day that has no right to be the day your life changes. Mild weather. The neighbor's dog barking at something in the yard. Raymond sitting in his chair reading since I'd known him, the way he had every morning since I'd known him. And then not. I held his hand for 4 hours in the hospital before they told me what I already knew. I will not spend much time on the grief because I think you know what grief is. And if you've lost the person you built your life around, you don't need me to describe it. What I will tell you is that the weeks after Raymond died, the weeks when I was emptied out and slow-moving, and present only in the most technical sense of the word, were the weeks when my daughter-in-law Natalie began to move. That is not a coincidence. I have thought about it enough to be certain. She had been waiting. Let me tell you about Natalie. My son Daniel is 43 years old. He is quiet, careful, precise. Raymond's son in temperament, which means he thinks before he speaks and he keeps his feelings close. He married Natalie 6 years ago, after a courtship that was, looking back, faster than it should have been. She was beautiful and decisive, and she made decisions for him before he'd finished thinking them through. And Daniel, who had always found decisions exhausting, found that restful. I understood it. I didn't trust it. Natalie grew up in what I would call a frugal household, which is a kind word for one where money was thin and resentment was thick. She watched her parents scrimp, that she would not be the kind of woman who scrimped. She wanted the right neighborhood and the right car and the right life, and there is nothing wrong with any of that. The wanting is human, but what she also wanted, and this is the part that matters, was to be the only woman who mattered in Daniel's life, and I was in the way. Not because I tried to be. I want to be honest about this, the way you have to be honest in any story that's going to mean something. I wasn't the perfect mother-in-law. I called sometimes when I shouldn't have. I offered opinions I should have swallowed. I showed up to their house once on a Sunday without calling ahead, and the look on Natalie's face, the way she stood in the doorway and made the space narrow, told me I had crossed a line I hadn't seen. I learned. I pulled back. I gave her the room she wanted, and I tried to be a guest in my son's life rather than a permanent resident of it. But Natalie was not a woman who accepted a retreat as settlement. For her, a step back was not enough. What she wanted was the ground itself. Raymond's death was her opportunity. In the 4 months after the funeral, Natalie began what I can only call a renovation of my son's memory. Small things first. A comment here about how Raymond had never really approved of Daniel's choices. A story there about something Raymond supposedly said at a family dinner. Something critical of Daniel. Something I had never heard and couldn't imagine Raymond saying. She planted these things gently, the way you plant seeds in good soil, and waited for them to take root. And Daniel, who was grieving his father in that private, sealed-off way of his, who was making sense of the loss in the silence, where men sometimes put their pain. Daniel was not looking closely enough to see the garden she was growing. Then the requests began. Could Daniel's parents' portraits come down from the hallway? They were making the house feel like a museum. Could the rocking chair Raymond had made by hand for Daniel's first birthday be moved to storage? So it was taking up space in the spare room they wanted to use for a home office. Could I perhaps call less often? Natalie needed Daniel to be present at home in the evenings, and my calls were a distraction. Daniel relayed these things to me in that careful, apologetic voice he uses when he's caught between two people and has already decided which one he can afford to disappoint. I complied. Every time, I complied. I told myself I was keeping the peace. I told myself that the peace was worth keeping. I had watched enough family disputes in my years in the legal office to know that the battles that seem important in the moment are often the ones that matter least in the end. And the ones that seem small are the load-bearing walls. So I said, yes, take the portraits down. Yes, put the rocking chair in storage. Yes, I'll call on Sundays only. What I did not say, because Natalie did not know this about me yet, was that I was watching, the way I had watched for 44 years. Reading the room, remembering everything, understanding what was being said versus what was meant, and building a file in the back of my mind the way a careful legal secretary builds a file, quietly, completely, with nothing left out. I need to tell you about the wedding album, because it matters what it was, not just what she did to it. Raymond and I were married on the 14th of June, 1971. I was 22 years old. My mother made my dress, cream-colored lace over satin, with buttons down the back that took her 4 hours to sew, and another woman 3 hours to fasten on the morning of the wedding. Raymond wore a suit he had saved for 6 months to buy. The photographer was a man named Gus, who was the cousin of a cousin, and who charged us $40 for the day and produced somehow the most beautiful photographs I have ever seen. There were 68 photographs. There were 68 photographs in that album. I know, because I counted them once, on a rainy afternoon when Daniel was small, and Raymond was working late and looked at them the way you look at evidence of a Zaudiquim, the way you look at evidence of a life you are still. Somewhat wonderingly, initiate. 6 photographs, Raymond in the church doorway, squinting slightly in the June light, looking like a man who cannot believe his luck. My mother at the reception, laughing with her head thrown back, the way she laughed when she was truly happy. She has been gone for 22 years. That photograph is the only one where she looks like herself. Raymond and I at the cake, his hand over mine, both us looking not at the camera but at each other, the way the best wedding photographs catch you. Unaware, unposed, in the middle of being exactly where you want to be. That album lived on the top shelf of my bedroom bookcase for 52 years. It survived 2 floods, 1 house fire, a move to a state we hated, a move back, and the general chaos of a life long lived. Raymond used to take it down sometimes on our anniversary, and we'd sit at the kitchen table and go through it the way you go through something you've memorized but still want to feel. It was the last record of the people we were before we became the people the years made us. Natalie burned it in a metal trash can on a Tuesday afternoon in March while I was sitting in the kitchen drinking tea. Here is what led to that afternoon. Because there is always a road, and you have to walk the whole thing to understand where you end up. 3 weeks before the fire, Natalie had called me to say that she and Daniel were expecting. My first grandchild. I was so happy I sat down on the floor. I am not a woman who sits on floors, but the news hit me in the knees and there I was, on the kitchen tiles, crying and laughing in a way that I hadn't done since Raymond died. I drove to their house the next day with flowers. I know I had been told to call ahead, but this was a grandchild. I thought surely this changes the rules. Surely a grandchild is the thing that lets a woman show up at her son's door with flowers without an appointment. Natalie opened the door and looked at the flowers, and then at me, and her face did something complicated and fast that she covered immediately with a smile. "Eleanor, I'm sorry," I just said. "A grandchild, Natalie. I had to come." Allie, I had to come. She let me in. She was gracious in the surface way that she did well. We sat in the living room she had decorated in shades of gray and white, and I noticed that the portrait of Raymond and me that used to hang in the hallway, the one Daniel had chosen himself, the one from our 40th anniversary, was gone. The wall was bare and newly painted. I didn't say anything about the portrait. I asked about the baby. I asked how she was feeling. I stayed for 40 minutes and I drove home. And I called Daniel that evening, and I said, very carefully, "Daniel, I noticed the anniversary portrait isn't in the hallway anymore." There was a pause. "We're redecorating," he said. "Where is it?" Another pause. Longer. Natalie felt it was. He stopped. "Start it again. We put some things in storage." "Daniel, Mom, please." I let it go. I let it go because the baby was coming, and I wanted to be in that baby's life. And I understood, with the clarity that comes from watching people navigate impossible situations for 44 years, that the price of being in that child's life was going to require a tolerance for losses. I wasn't allowed to call losses. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my friend Miriam, who lives 3 streets from Daniel and Natalie. Miriam had been walking her dog past their house and had seen, through the back gate that was standing open, a small fire in their yard. She hadn't thought much of it. People burn yard waste, leaves, that kind of thing. But she had noticed, she said carefully, that it looked like it might have been paper or photographs. Something that went quickly. The call came at 7 in the evening. I sat with it for 2 days before I drove over. I told Natalie I was stopping by to drop off some things for the baby. And I had brought things. I wasn't lying about that. A soft blanket and some books I'd saved from Daniel's childhood. I came in through the back as she'd invited me to, since the front path was being repaved. And I stood at the kitchen window, while Natalie was in the other room, and I looked at the metal trash can in the backyard. There were ashes in it. Gray and light, the kind of ash that paper makes. I went to my car. I drove home. I sat in Raymond's chair. I still call it Raymond's chair, and I let myself understand what I was now certain had happened. She had burned the album. The only question I had was whether Daniel knew. I called him that night. I kept my voice steady. 44 years in a law office teaches you to keep your voice steady in moments when steadiness is the only advantage you have. I told him I was doing some organizing, and I'd been looking for the box of our old family photographs, the Christmas ones. He was small. I asked if he'd seen them anywhere. Another pause. That pause. "Mom," he said, "I'll have to ask Natalie." "Of course," I said. No rush. But there was a rush. There was a terrible rush because the next afternoon I drove past their house. For no reason I could honestly explain, except that I had to know. I watched through the windshield as Natalie walked into the backyard with something under her arm. I parked down the street. I sat, and then I drove home and I went in the back way, and I stood at my kitchen window and I watched. And there she was, standing at the metal trash can, holding my wedding album. I watched her flip the pages one more time. Not with regret, but with the quick efficiency of someone completing a task they've been putting off. I watched her hold it over the can. I watched her flick the lighter twice. I watched my wedding dress burn at 71 years old, 18 months after your husband's death. 18 months after your husband's death, at the hands of a woman who has spent 3 years methodically removing every trace of you from your son's life. It does something to you. Not what you might at passion. I had read in 44 years of legal work about crimes of passion, about people who did destructive, irreversible things in a moment of uncontrolled emotion. What Natalie had done was not a crime of passion. She had planned it. She had waited until a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel was at work. She had done it calmly and efficiently. That told me everything I needed to know about what I was dealing with, and it told me that everything Raymond had prepared, everything he had told me in those last weeks to keep safe, was about to matter in a way I hadn't yet had to use. Let me tell you about Raymond's safe. 3 weeks before Raymond died, he had a heart condition. We knew the direction things were going. He had time to prepare in ways that didn't feel like preparation, ways that felt like just talking, just being together in the evenings. Raymond asked me to bring him his old lockbox from the office, the small gray metal one he'd kept for years with insurance documents, a house deed, that kind of thing. He sat at the kitchen table for 3 evenings in a row, and he sorted through it. I didn't ask many questions. I brought him tea. I sat with him sometimes. And on the 3rd evening, he said, "Eleanor, I need you to take the important things out of the new one, the one I bolted from the closet, the one I bolted down." "All right," I said. "And I need you not to open it again," he said. "Not until something happens that makes you need to." I looked at him. "You'll know," he said. "You always know. You were always the one who understood what was happening before anyone else did." He squeezed my hand. He smiled in that way he had, slightly sideways, as if he was in on a joke that hadn't landed yet for everyone else. "There are things in there for Daniel," he said, "for when he needs them. And there's something for you. Don't let anyone tell you what you are or aren't entitled to, Eleanor. It's all in there." I closed the safe that night, and I did not open it again. Not even in those first terrible months after Raymond died, when I was alone in the house and the nights were very long, and I would have opened almost anything just to feel connected to him. I honored his instruction because I am a woman who keeps her word, and because some part of me, the part that had spent a career in law, the part that read people the way Raymond read engineering schematics, understood that Raymond had been doing what he always did, building something that held. Now let me tell you about the week after the wedding album burned. I did not call Daniel immediately. I waited. I made tea. I sat in Raymond's chair. I thought about what I had seen and what it meant and what the right move was, and I thought about Raymond, who built bridges, who understood that a structure is only as strong as the moment of maximum stress, and who had spent 20 years quietly and carefully that was on and carry span for the weight that was on me now. Then I went to the closet. I turned the combination I had memorized on the night he showed me, and I opened the safe. I will not make you wait the way the family had to wait, but I will ask you to understand that what was inside that safe was not one thing. It was several things, assembled by a man who thought in the long term the way only certain people do, the way a bridge builder thinks about load distribution across decades. The first thing was the deed to this house, clear and paid and in my name alone. Raymond had transferred it fully into my name 14 months before he died, without telling me. As a precaution, he didn't explain that I now understood completely. The second thing was a copy of Raymond's will. The original was with our attorney, but this was the copy, annotated in Raymond's handwriting in the margins, with small notes beside each section. Notes like a man talking to you from across time. The third thing was a smaller envelope, sealed, with my name on it in Raymond's handwriting. I opened it. It was a letter. Raymond's letter to me. I will not share what it said, because it was private and it was between him and me, and it is the most precious thing I own. But it told me what I needed to know, and it told me I was right to have waited. The fourth thing was a manila envelope, thick, rubber-banded, with Daniel's name on it. And the fifth thing, the thing that made me sit down on the closet floor for 10 minutes before I could stand up again, was a smaller envelope labeled in Raymond's measured, engineer's printing. For if you need to protect yourself, inside that envelope were 2 things. The first was a notarized letter from Raymond to our attorney, dated 4 months before his death, describing in precise language, the language of a man who knew how to document things for posterity. His concerns about the dynamic he was observing between Natalie and our family. His observations. The things he had noticed, the slow removal, the reframing of history. Written and signed and witnessed, sitting in a fireproof safe, waiting. The second was a USB drive. Raymond was 70 years old when he died, and he was not a technology person. He had asked Daniel once to show him how to use a USB drive, and I had watched Daniel show him, and I had thought nothing of it at the time because Daniel showed his father small technology things all the time, patiently and kindly, the way Raymond had once taught Daniel to build things. I put the USB drive into my laptop. There were 47 photographs on it. Raymond had scanned every photograph from our weddings albums. 68 photographs, high-resolution scans, every one of them, including the one of my mother laughing, and the one of Raymond in the doorway, and the one the two of us at the cake looking at each other instead of the camera. He had made a digital copy of every photograph in that album. In that album, he had put it in the safe. He had bolted the safe to the floor, and he had never once mentioned it to me, because he understood, the way certain quiet, careful, long-thinking men understand things, that the value of protection is that the person being protected doesn't have to think about it. I sat on the closet floor, and I held the USB drive, and I thought about my husband, who was gone, who had known before I knew, who had prepared before there was anything to prepare for, and I cried for about 20 minutes. Then I stood up, I washed my face, I made another cup of tea, and then I made some calls. The first call was to our attorney, Margaret, who had been handling our family's legal matters for 15 years, and who had a voice like good furniture, solid and unimpressed by things that didn't deserve impression. I told her what I had found in the safe. I told her what I had witnessed in the backyard. She was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor," she said, "do you want to tell you what your options are? Or do you want me to tell you what your options are?" "Both," I said. She told me the second call was to Miriam, who had called me about the fire in the first place, and who I now asked to write down formally what she had seen. Miriam, bless her, said, "I already did. I wrote it down the night I called you. I had a feeling." The third call was to Daniel. I asked him to come for dinner on Saturday. Just him. I told him I had something important to talk about and that I needed him to hear it without interruption, and that after he'd heard it, he could do whatever he needed to do. But I needed him to come. He came. I had set the table the way I set it for important things, the good dishes, the cloth napkins, a meal that took effort. I had learned from 44 years of watching lawyers that the environment of a conversation matters. People are more honest when they are fed and warm and sitting at a table that shows them they are valued. I had also printed the photographs from the USB drive, all 68 of them in good color on quality paper, in a new album I had bought, and I had placed it in the center of the table where Daniel would see it when he sat down. He walked into the dining room. He stopped. He looked at the album, at the photographs, at my mother laughing with her head thrown back, at Raymond in the church doorway, at the two of us at the cake unposed. "Mom," he said. His voice was strange. I thought, "Sit down, Daniel," I said. "Please." He sat down. I fed him first. The whole meal, start to finish. We talked about the baby. We talked about his work. I asked him how he was doing, really doing, and he told me more than he'd told me in a year, the way people do, when they're given a table and time, and someone who isn't waiting for them to finish so she can say her thing. I listened. I remembered. I filed it away the way I file everything completely. Then I cleared the plates, and I put my hands on the table, and I told him what I needed to tell him. "Daniel," I said, "I need you to tell me what happened to our wedding album." His face changed. The way faces change when people are caught not betwersions of their loyalty. "It was an accident," he said. "Natalie was doing a clear out and she burned it," I said, not harshly, just plainly. He went still. "I was at the kitchen window," I said. "I watched it happen. I saw her. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and she did it deliberately, Daniel, and I need you to know that I know that, not so that you can be angry with her right now in front of me, but so that we can stop having a conversation that pretends I don't." He put his hands over his face. He sat like that for a long moment. "I didn't know she was going to do it," he said. "I want you to believe that." "I do believe it," I said, and I did. That was the truth. "But Daniel, I need you to understand something. This was not the first thing. The portraits, the rocking chair your grandfather made, the way the history of this family has been, slowly and carefully, removed from your house and your memory. I have watched this happen for 3 years, and I have this very something because I was afraid that saying something would cost me you. But your father's wedding photographs were burned in a trash can in your backyard, and I am not going to be silent about that. His father's son, holding it all close. What do you want me to do? He asked. And here is where I opened the safe for him. Not literally. I had brought the contents to the table. The manila envelope with his name on it. I slid it across the table. Inside was Raymond's letter to Daniel. I don't know everything it said. It was sealed, and I had not opened it. But I know what Raymond told me he had put in it, because we talked about it in those last weeks, in the way you talk about things that matter, when the time for pretending you have endless time has passed. It was everything Raymond had wanted to say to his son about the kind of life worth building, about choosing a partner who adds to who you are rather than subtracting what came before you, about the rocking chair Raymond had made when Daniel was born, on which Raymond's own father had rocked Raymond, the same chair that was now in a storage unit, about what it means to be a man who honors where he came from while building where he's going, about the baby who was coming and what Raymond hoped would one day know about the family it came from. Raymond had written it all down. Raymond had written it all down, and he had put it in a fireproof safe. I watched Daniel read it. He read it slowly, the way his father always read, thoroughly, without rushing, understanding that some things deserved to be taken in at the pace they were given. I drank my tea. I looked at the photograph in the center of the table, the one of Raymond in the church doorway, squinting in the June light, looking like a man who can't believe his luck. When Daniel finished reading, he put the letter down. He looked at the album. He looked at the 68 photographs that Natalie had thought were ash. He looked at me. He said, "Your father," I said. And that was all I needed to that evening. I need to tell you what I did not do that evening, because it matters as much as what I did. I did not tell Daniel what to do about Natalie. I did not call her a villain. I did not lay out the case for ending his marriage, although I had in my possession, in Raymond's notarized letter to our attorney, in Miriam's written account, in 44 years of professional habit, more than enough to build one. I did not cry, because my son was sitting at my table, and the last thing a mother should make her child feel in a moment like that is that his pain is a burden to be managed. What I did was tell him the truth, the plain, complete, unadorned truth, the way you tell it when you have finally stopped protecting people from it, and then I told him something else. Your father put something in that safe for me, too. I said, a letter. You don't need to know what it says. I want you to know that one of the things it says is that you are the best thing we ever did. Not the house, not anything else, you. And whatever you decide about your marriage, about Natalie, about how you want to build this next part of your life, your father and I are on your side. We have always been on your side. That has never been contingent on anything. Daniel cried. He is his father's son. He cried the way his father cried, privately and completely, with his whole chest, turned slightly away as though the feeling was too large for the room. I gave him time. I did not rush it. And when he was done, he looked at the photographs on the table for a long time. The baby, he said finally. I want this baby to know who we are. The baby will know, I said. I have every photograph, every one. Your father made sure. Daniel stayed until 11 o'clock that night. We went through the album, all 68 photographs, and I told him the story behind everyone, the dress my mother made, the cousin photographer named Gus, Raymond's suit he'd saved 6 months for, the way we'd looked at each other instead of the camera because we'd forgotten, for a moment, that anyone else was there. He also took Raymond's letter. Now let me tell you what happened after. After, because I know you want the full account. I am a legal secretary. I understand the importance of the full account. Daniel and Natalie had, as I was told later, a long and serious the album under his arm. The night he came home with the album, I don't know exactly what was said because it wasn't mine to know. What I can tell you is that Daniel called me 2 days later, and he sounded like himself. Not the careful, apologetic version of himself that he'd worn for the past 3 years, like a coat that didn't quite fit, but the actual Daniel, the one who has his father's directness when he finally decides a thing needs saying. He told me that Natalie had claimed the album was an accident, a miscommunication, that she'd thought I'd given her permission to clear out some old things. A story so thin you could see through it, and that he had told her plainly that he didn't believe it, and that was whether it was an accident, regardless of whether it was an accident, the pattern it was part of was not. He told me they were in counseling. He told me the baby was due in 4 months. He told me he was working on some things he should have worked on sooner and that he was sorry it had taken this long and that he wanted me at his table every Sunday for dinner. I said yes to the Sunday dinners. I said yes without hesitation. Natalie and I are not friends. I will not pretend otherwise because I am 71 years old and I have earned the right to be honest about what is and isn't true. But she came to the first Sunday dinner and she looked at the wedding album that I had placed on the bookshelf in the living room. The bookshelf, where it will live from now on, where she can see it every time she enters that room. And her face was complicated and quiet. She did not apologize. She is not built for apology. But she sat down and she ate the meal I made, and she asked me, toward the end of the evening, if the baby could have a family name. Raymond, I said, if it's a boy. She nodded. Just once. It is not enough. But it is a start, and I have lived long enough to know that some things start slowly, and it is better for them to start slowly and mean it than to start quickly and be forgotten. The baby was born 7 weeks ago. A boy, Raymond Daniel Voss. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and his grandfather's eyes, that particular dark gray that Raymond's eyes were, that I have not seen since the hospital in October 18 months ago, and that I was not prepared to see again quite so completely, quite so undeniably, in this 7-pound, 4-ounce person who has no idea what he carries. I was in the room when he was born. Natalie agreed. I stood at the head of the bed and I held Natalie's hand through the last part, the hardest part, and she held mine back, hard, in the way that people hold on when they need something to hold on to, and you are what's available. In the moments after, when the room was full of that particular stunned, exhausted joy that only that room ever holds, Daniel put his son in my arms. And I held Raymond Daniel Voss against my chest, and I told him quietly, "Your grandfather has been waiting, could hear. Your grandfather's been waiting for you. He's been waiting a long time, and he left you everything he had." I bring the photo album every time I visit. I have been showing Raymond, that is what we call him, Raymond. All of us, without discussion, it simply became his name. The photographs since he was 3 weeks old. He cannot see them properly yet. He does not understand what he is looking at. But there is something about being held by a person you love and being shown beautiful things, even things you don't yet understand, that goes in somewhere and stays. His grandfather in the church doorway, squinting in the June light. His great-grandmother, laughing with her head thrown back. His grandparents at the cake, looking at each other instead of the camera. These will be his memories before he has his own. I am giving them to him the way you give someone a language, early, before they know they're learning it, so that when they need it, it's already there. Natalie tried to burn something she thought was paper and images. What she did not understand, what a woman who measures worth in labels and surfaces could not have understood, is that some things exist in more forms than you can see. Raymond understood that. He spent his career making sure the invisible structure was strong enough to hold whatever the surface had to endure. He was right. It held. If someone has tried to burn what you carries, not always with a lighter, sometimes with silence, with revision, with the slow, patient removal of everything that reminds them you existed before they arrived, I want you to know something. What is real does not burn. It can be copied. It can be documented. It can be placed in a fireproof safe by a man who loved you and bolted it to the floor of a closet and trusted you to know when to open it. The photographs are in the living room now, on the bookshelf where they live, and little Raymond is in them, in his way. In the gray of his eyes, in the set of his shoulders already, in the particular way he looks at things, careful and thorough, as if he's already measuring what holds them together. His grandfather's son's son, the bridge builder's grandson, everything that was supposed to last is lasting. That is my story. A woman who watched her wedding photographs burn and smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, because she knew that what her husband had quietly, completely, and without any fanfare built could not be touched by fire. If this found you at a moment when you needed it, leave a comment. I read them all. And subscribe, because next time I'll tell you about the Sunday dinner when Natalie asked me to teach her to make Raymond's favorite pie, and what I said and what she said after. Some things start slowly, but they start. I want to go back to something, because I don't think I gave it the weight it deserves. And in a story like this one, the things that don't get enough weight have a way of making the whole structure feel incomplete. Raymond taught me that. Never skip the load-bearing detail. So let me go back to the Sunday I showed up with flowers. I told you. Natalie opened the door and her face did something complicated and fast. What I didn't tell you is what I saw in the hallway behind her, because I only understood what it meant later. On the night I opened the safe, there was a box, a cardboard moving box, the medium-sized kind, sitting at the end of the hallway with its flaps folded shut. It had a strip of tape across the top, the brown packing kind, which told me it had been sealed, not just set aside. On the side, in black marker in Natalie's handwriting, was a single word. I thought nothing of it at the time. People have boxes. People tape things shut and mean to deal with them later. I stepped over the thought, the way you step over something on a path without looking down to see what it is. It was 2 months later, when I was helping Daniel look for a specific photograph, not from the wedding album, but from his childhood, a particular Christmas, from when he was about 8, that he wanted to frame for the baby's room, that I asked about the boxes in storage. Which storage? I said. The unit you rent, or something at the house? A pause. Both, Daniel said carefully. Why? I'm just trying to figure out where the Christmas photos would be. Another pause, longer. The kind of pause that isn't about thinking, it's about deciding. Mom, he said, I'll look. He looked. He found the Christmas photographs. They were in the storage unit, which had more of our family's belongings in it than I had realized, a discovery I allowed myself to make slowly over several conversations, rather than all at once, because some things are easier to receive in portions. The Christmas photograph was there. Most of the photographs from Daniel's childhood were there. Several things I had given them over the years. A quilt I'd made, a set of books, a small watercolor of the coast that had hung in our first house and that I had given to Daniel when they bought their home, were there, all of it, packed away, shut, taped shut, labeled storages. I want you to sit with that for a moment, not because I want you to be angry, although anger is a reasonable response, but because I want you to understand the architecture of what Natalie was building. She wasn't just removing objects, she was removing context. She was removing the evidence of a history that predated her, a history in which Daniel had a mother who loved him, and a father who built things and grandparents and traditions and a self that existed before she came to define it. She was renovating him, the way you renovate a house you've bought, removing the old fixtures, painting over the colors the previous owners chose, making it yours until someone walking through couldn't tell who had lived there before. And Daniel, who trusted her and loved her, and decisions exhausting and was easier to lead than to convince, had let it happen, room by room. Raymond was not a man who used dramatic language. That about used dramatic language. He was precise and quiet, and he said exactly what he meant, no more and no less. But I heard him once, at a dinner with another couple whose marriage was in visible difficulty, say something in a voice so low. I wasn't sure I was meant to hear it. He said, "The danger isn't the big thing you can see coming. The danger is the 100 small things that each seem reasonable on their own." He was 45 when he said it. I have thought about it ever since. Natalie's 100 small things were taking down a portchair, requesting fewer phone calls, packing childhood photographs in a box marked Sturgis, removing a watercolor, burning a wedding album, each one on its own, arguable, explainable, reasonable enough that the person experiencing it could be made to feel unreasonable for objecting. Together, they were a demolition. I do not think Natalie is evil. I want to be clear about that because I was a legal secretary for a long time, and I understand that most people are not evil. They are frightened, and frightened people do destructive things, and then find internal reasons why the destruction was necessary. Natalie is frightened. She has been frightened, I suspect, since long before she met my son. She was raised in a home where worth was proven by exclusion, by having more, by needing less, by making sure the people around you couldn't get too close. Because closeness is vulnerability, and vulnerability is where you get hurt. That does not make what she did acceptable, but it makes it, in some measure, explicable. And explaining is not the same as forgiving, but it is the first thing you have to do before forgiveness becomes possible. And I am at an age where I would rather be moving toward possible than standing in impossible indefinitely. This is what I have tried to give Daniel, not a verdict on his wife, but a full account of what has happened and what it has meant, and then the space to make his own decision about what comes next. That is what Raymond asked me to do in those evenings at the kitchen table when he sorted through the lockbox and didn't say everything he was thinking, but said enough. "Don't fight his battles," Raymond said once. "Just make sure he has the truth of things when he needs it. He'll do the right thing when he knows what the right thing is. He always does. He just takes his time getting there." Raymond was right. He usually was. Daniel has taken his time, but he has gotten there. There is something else I found in the safe that I haven't told you yet. I've been deciding whether to, and I have decided yes, because it is the part of the story that tells you the most about the kind of man Raymond was, and the most about the kind of inheritance. Not money, not objects he left behind. At the very bottom of the safe, underneath the deed and the will and the letters and the USB drive DF, there was a small box, jewelry-sized, hinged lid. I opened it. Inside was my engagement ring. Not my actual engagement ring. I wear that. I have worn it since 1970. I will wear it until I cannot. This was a replica of it, costume quality, made to look exactly like mine. And underneath the ring in the box was a small folded note in Raymond's handwriting. It said, "In case someone ever tries to tell Daniel you weren't his first family, show him this. He'll understand." I stared at that note for a long time. Raymond had made a copy of my engagement ring. He had put it in a box in the safe, in case someone tried to tell our son that our family, our history, our 53 years, didn't count as much as whatever came after. He had made proof. Not because he mistrusted Daniel, because he understood that when someone is being steadily, quietly renovated by a person they love, the things they need most are the things that existed before the renovation started, the things that say, "My grandson, this was real, this counted, this came first and it mattered, and you were loved here before you were loved anywhere else." I put the ring on the table in front of Daniel that Saturday night, after the photographs, after Raymond's letter, after the part where Daniel cried and I gave him time. He looked at it, he looked at me, he picked it up and turned it in his fingers. "He made a copy," Daniel said. I said. Daniel closed his hand around it. He sat like that for a while with his father's proof in his fist and the photographs of his father's life spread across the table in front of him. "He knew," Daniel said. I said. "He knew this was going to happen. He built for it," I said. "The way he built for everything. For the thing he couldn't see yet but knew was coming. Daniel has the ring now. He keeps it in his desk at home, in the drawer with the things he considers important. I know because he told me, because the fact that he told me means that there are things in his house that he considers his, that belong to his history, and not to Natalie's renovation. That drawer is his fireproof safe. Raymond would say it counts. Let me tell you what Sundays look like now, because I think you deserve the full picture and not just the justice. The justice is satisfying, I know. That's why you've stayed this long. But the full picture is richer and more honest and more worth having. Sundays are at my house. Daniel comes and Natalie comes, and now little Raymond comes, which has changed the quality of everything. The way a baby changes the quality of everything. Makes the air in a room different. Makes the petty things smaller. Makes the people in the room remember, without meaning to, what they're actually here for. I cook. I cook the things Raymond loved. The braised short ribs, the apple pie with the lattice crust, the potato soup that was his mother's recipe and that Daniel has loved since he was 4 years old. The kitchen smells the way this kitchen has always smelled on Sundays, and I think that is its own kind of argument, its own kind of document. Natalie sits at the table and she eats and she holds the baby. And sometimes, When she doesn't know I'm watching, she watches me with a look that is hard to read. Not hostile, not warm, exactly. Something in between, something that is working itself out, the way a difficult knot works itself out if you're patient and don't force it. She asked me last month to show her how to make the apple pie. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she does most things, without preamble or apology. "I want Raymond to grow up knowing this pie," she said. I looked at her for a moment. She held my gaze. She has never been a woman who looks away. "All right," I said. We stood at this kitchen counter together for 2 hours on a Thursday afternoon, her hands learning the crust, my voice explaining what Raymond's mother's voice had once explained to me, the recipe passing through another set of hands, the same lattice, the same smell. She didn't apologize for the album. She has not apologized, and I have made my peace with that, because an apology delivered under pressure is not an apology, it's a performance. And I have seen enough performances in my years in a law office to know the difference. What she did instead was stand in my kitchen and learn to make the pie. I am choosing to count that. Raymond would count it. I'm almost sure. The album is on the bookshelf. The photographs are restored. The ring is in Daniel's desk. Little Raymond Daniel Voss is 7 weeks old and has his grandfather's eyes and is being rocked. Sometimes in the rocking chair that came back from storage last month and now lives in the nursery corner where it was always supposed to live. Daniel got it back without my asking. He just showed up one Sunday with it in the back of his car. "And Dad's rocking chair," he said, simply, as though there had never been any question. I didn't say anything. I helped him carry it in. The things that last are the things built to last, bolted to the floor, stored in fireproof places, written down in careful handwriting and sealed in envelopes, and trusted to the people who will know when to open them. Raymond built for 50 years, and he built right, and the proof of it is in a nursery on a Tuesday evening, where my son is rocking his son in a chair his grandfather made, under a photograph of him squinting in June light, who looks like he cannot believe his luck. He was lucky. We both were. And so, in ways he is only beginning to have the words for, is little Raymond. That is the whole story. The full account, if it found you at a moment when you needed to know that the quiet, careful preparations of someone who loved you are still out there, working, still holding up what needs to be held. I am glad. Drop a comment. Tell me about the fireproof thing someone left for you, the thing they prepared before you knew you'd need it. I read every one. I'll see you next Sunday. There is one more thing I have not told you. I have been holding it back, not for drama. I am too old for drama for its own sake, but because it is the piece that I needed to find the right words for, and the right words took time. 3 weeks after the Sunday dinner, where I showed Daniel everything, I received a phone call from our attorney, Margaret. She had received a letter, not from Natalie, not from anyone connected to our family, from a woman I had never heard of, named Patricia Halloran, who had been Natalie's mother's attorney, and who had been trying to locate Natalie for purposes of a state notification. Natalie's mother had died. Quietly, without announcement, Natalie in a city 3 states away, where she had been living alone for the past decade. She had died with almost nothing to her name, and had left in a brief handwritten will, a box of her possessions to her daughter. The box was described in the will as containing personal effects, correspondence, and a small number of photographs. Margaret relayed all of this to me with her customary precision. And then she said something that I have thought about every day since. She said, "Eleanor, there was a note attached to the box, to be given to Natalie along with the contents. I have a copy here because Patricia Halloran sent it to me for our files. I want to read it to you because I think you need to hear it." The note was in the handwriting of Natalie's mother. It said, and I am giving you this as closely as I can render it because it matters precisely. "Natalie, I know I was not easy. I know I taught you the wrong things about what matters and who does. I hope you have figured out some of it on your own by now, because I never learned how to show you a better way, and I am sorry for that. There are photographs in this box. Most of them are of you when you were small. I took a lot of photographs of you when you were small because you were the best thing I had, and I did not know how to tell you that out loud. Keep them. Love, Mom." There was one other item in the box, a handmade quilt. Yellowed at the edges, hand-stitched, the kind of thing made by someone who worked at it slowly over years, in small pieces, in whatever time they had. Not beautiful in the way a professional quilt is beautiful. Beautiful in the way a thing made without resources but with intent is beautiful. Across the center of it, in uneven but deliberate embroidery, Natalie had been making it since the year he was born. Her mother had been making it since the year Natalie was born. Margaret told me Natalie had come to her office to collect the box and had opened it there, not knowing what was in it. She had opened the quilt and read the note, and she had sat down in the chair across from Margaret's desk, and she had not been able to speak for some time. I am telling you this not because I think it excuses what Natalie did. It does not. What she did to those photographs was wrong. What she did to the history of my son's family was wrong. Those things are true, and they remain true. But I am a woman who has spent her whole life reading people. And what I read now when I look at Natalie, at the way she stands in my kitchen on Thursday afternoons learning to make pie, at the way she holds her son and sometimes holds him a little too hard, too close, the way people hold things they are afraid of losing, is a woman who was never taught what lasts, who was raised by a woman who took photographs and could not say the words, and could not give it, who made a quilt and could not give it, who loved her daughter and expressed it in ways that arrived 40 years too late in a box from an attorney. Natalie burned my photographs because she had been taught that the past is something that threatens the present, that the old things are competition, not foundation. That love is a limited resource, and history is a claim on the person you love. If you want to keep them, you have to clear the field. Her mother taught her that by example. By taking the photographs and not showing them. By making the quilt and not giving it. By loving fiercely and expressing it. Never. Until there was nothing left to express it to. I know what it is to be taught the wrong things about love. I was lucky enough to marry a man who showed me, every day for 53 years, the right things. I have no credit for that luck. I just have its results. I called Natalie the day after Margaret told me about the box. I called her directly, which I had never done, or not in the way I did it then. Without a reason, without a request, without anything to negotiate. "Natalie," I said when she answered, "I heard about your mother. I'm sorry." A silence. Long enough that I thought she might hang up. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was careful, contained, doing the surface work that voices do when the thing underneath is too large to bring up. "I know you and I have things between us that aren't resolved," I said, "and I'm not calling about those. I'm just calling because your mother died, and that is a hard thing, and you deserve to have someone say so." Another silence. "Eleanor," she said, and she stopped. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "I mean it. I just wanted you to know." We stayed on the phone for a moment longer, the way people do when neither of them is willing to be the first to make the goodbye that ends something. Not the call, but the quality the call has introduced. And then Natalie said, quietly, the kind of quiet that has weight in it. "She made me a quilt I never knew. She made it the year I was born, and she kept it for 40 years, and she never told me." "I know," I said. "How do you do that?" Natalie said, "How do you make something for someone you love and never tell them?" I thought about my wedding album burning. I thought about the photographs on the USB drive. I thought about Raymond at the kitchen table, those 3 evenings sorting through the lockbox, not explaining everything he was doing, trusting that I would know when I needed to know. "Some people," I said, "were never taught how to say the thing out loud, so they put it somewhere, and they hope the person they love will find it eventually." A silence. "She put it in a box," Natalie said. "Raymond put it in a safe. Raymond put it in a safe," I said. I heard her breath change, just slightly. "They're not so different," she said. "No," I said. "They're not." We did not make peace that afternoon on the phone. Peace is not made in phone calls, I have learned. It is made in kitchens and at tables, and in the slow accumulation of Sunday dinners and Thursday afternoons and the particular grace of holding a baby between 2 women who have reasons not to like each other and finding, in that small face that has nothing to do with any of it, a reason to try. But something shifted. I felt it. The way you feel a load redistribute when one of the points of tension releases, not gone, but differently held. Natalie brought the quilt to Sunday dinner the following week. She brought it folded over her arm. The way you carry something you've decided deserves carrying carefully. She put it in little Raymond's crib that evening, over the cream-colored blanket I'd brought, and she stood there looking at two things layered together. Her mother's handmade and my offering slept. She didn't have to. Little Raymond sleeps under. Raymond sleeps under both of them. A grandmother who made something and kept it too long, who could not find the words until there were no more words left to find. And a grandmother who made sure the words got through while there was still time. Both of them, in the end, trying the same thing. That is what I know about love in the long run. It is almost never the thing that looks like love in the moment. It is the safe bolted to the floor, the USB drive made by a man who didn't fully understand USB drives, the quilt stitched in spare hours across 40 years and carried across a life and delivered in a box from an attorney's office in a city 3 states away. It is the thing you build for the moment you cannot yet see. If you have loved someone that way, quietly, completely, in the way that prepares rather than declares, then you understand what I mean when I say that Raymond is still here. Not in any way that I can explain to someone who hasn't felt it, but in the photographs on the bookshelf, in the ring in Daniel's desk, in the rocking chair that came back from storage, in the gray eyes of a 7-week-old baby who looks at things the way his grandfather looked at things, carefully, thoroughly, measuring what holds them together. He is here in all the structures he built, and they are holding. They are holding just fine. Thank you for staying with me tonight, all the way to the end of this story. It is the most important one I have told. Drop a comment below. Tell me about the person in your life who prepared something for you before you knew you'd need it. I want to know. I will read every one. And subscribe, because next Sunday I will be here. I am always here on Sundays now. That is the rule Daniel made, and I am keeping it.